Let me tell you about a story in the 80s that occurred. There was a friend of the teachers that got elected to the state legislature, Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson served on joint finance, and Gary Johnson was kind of the father of the bargaining law for teachers.
He was a teacher.
Yeah, and he was a teacher in Beloit. And Gary decided to move up to leadership in the assembly and become speaker. But there was another guy that was also running, a guy by the name of Giacomonis. And the two of them ran off in this election, and Morris and I talked about it, and well, we got to support Gary, we got to do something for Gary. And I said, well, what if Gary doesn't win? Well, we got a problem then. I said, well, we need some deniability here, and we need to cover our ass on this thing. And I said, we need to figure out a way, Morris, that we can support Gary, and then if it blows up in our face, then somebody's got to go talk to Giacomonis and make this thing heal up. Well, Gary lost, Giacomonis won, and Giacomonis sent word over to the organization at that time that you guys aren't going to get a goddamn bill passed over my dead body the rest of the session. Well, that was kind of fired a shot at us, so I scheduled an appointment to go over to see Giacomonis and talk to him and apologize a little bit and did a little dance and whatever. And he said, Carmen, we can clean this all up. He said, you send Morris over. So I go back to the office and I said, Morris, you have an appointment tomorrow at 9 o'clock with Giacomonis in his office. Morris said, what's going to happen? I said, you're going to get your ass kicked.
And you're going to kiss it.
Morris went to the meeting, and it absolutely happened that way. But we got our legislation through. It started rolling again. Those are the kind of things. Because I told Morris, I said, I got to be the clean guy on this because I am elected by the members, and I don't want it to blow up in my face and affect my election. You're hired under contract. We just got you a 3-year renewal on your contract with a raise, so you're going to have to be the fall guy on this one.
Well, another thing about Morris is he always stayed in the background. You didn't see him in that many pictures. He's not like the executive directors of the NRA that is all over the place, and nobody knows who the president is. He always pushed the teachers to be up front, to have the pictures taken, to give speeches where speeches were necessary, and he stayed in the background. But you didn't screw around with him, because one of the things I knew about Morris, in his kind and gentle way, he knew how to fight back.
Oh, yeah.
And he did many times.
Yeah. On that point, I'm Terry Craney. We had president from 1995 to 2001, vice president from 91 to 95, 1991, 95. I came in a little later in my
But you were on the board, Terry.
But I was on the board all the time he was there.
And you were an NEA director.
What?
You were
And an NEA director, right, absolutely. So I consider knowing Morris pretty well, okay, over my years. I mean, I thought he was very thoughtful, very intelligent. He also thought that information was power. And, there's a number of stories about that where he would keep everything close to his vest, but you knew he was gathering information to make a decision. Whether it was the 90% right or the 10% wrong that Carmen talked about, he still needed that information. The other thing about Morris is that he never forgot his roots, from my perspective. Some people, when they obtain some of those positions, forget the people that helped them there and get them there and those types of things. He always kept pretty close. I mean, he would contact me after, not as often as I think he contacted many of you, but he would contact me if he needed some information in this guy.
When I was elected to the board of directors of WEAC, Lori Wynn called me in, and she introduced herself. She said, I'm Lori Wynn, and she said, I'm going to be the president of WEAC eventually. She had everything, in her head. She's very articulate, she's quick. So she was no lightweight. And she told me, you ever screw with me, it's over. I mean, the first time I met the woman, That's the way she was. And this organization, I know that one of the problems they had, where they had a deep discussion, battle, was when Lori Wynn wanted to call the statewide strike. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And Morris said, we're not at that point. We're progressing, but you're pushing the teachers too hard. We had to sell unionism as the united teaching profession to make it, hey, more acceptable, okay? But a statewide strike, we're really gonna get kicked. And she called it statewide strike, if you remember, and it flopped,
Yeah.
obviously, and flopped big. And there were a lot of people who were very upset about that. But she locked horns with him on that one, and he was not gonna say, well, okay, try it out. So the two did not agree on tactics. She just simply wanted the action now, and she did not see down the long road.
We did have some light moments too, and I remember I was presiding at a board meeting one night, and things were really getting tense. And I don't know what the issue was, but the pressure was building in the room, and you could hear a pin drop, and Collins was speaking about something.
As always.
Now to set the stage, Morris had he came into this meeting wearing a bright lemon lime colored neon sport coat.
Yes.
It would just scorch your retina, you know. And he was sitting there alongside of the officers up on the stage, and Collins was orating about something and trying to break the tension in the room. And as he wrapped up his comments, he looked over at Morris, and he said, "Morris, and by the way, the batteries are running low in your sports coat." Just destroyed the room. Just destroyed the room, because everybody was admiring that coat. And things moved on and got off. The tension was reduced considerably. It was just by one little move. And Morris was kind of the brunt of a lot of the jokes in the organization, because you could play him off from him. Well, he was very stoic about stuff, you know. And
Yeah, Morris was very stoic, but he did have a sense of humor. Absolutely. On a lighter moment here too, and I see Collins made a point of that, and I was involved in that. Another story, and this is a humorous one. Morris used to have his, what we used to call Morrisisms. You know, he'd follow up the English language, something royally at times, okay? And so we were in negotiations, it was Dick Collins, I, and a few others, and Morris, with the Wisconsin Federation of Teachers, and we were talking about some initial discussions about possible merger. This would have been back in the mid-90s, probably early 90s, 1990s. And we're right over here at the Sheraton, and we had a conference room where the two groups, the WFT, Wisconsin Federation of Teachers, and WEAC met, and then we had two caucus rooms where we go and discuss, you know, afterwards. And we were discussing, and it was getting fairly tense, and we had given them a proposal. And I won't get into the details, and in fact, I don't remember all the details. But we had a proposal that we had given to the WFT. And WFT took it and went to their caucus room, and they said, "We'll be back in 15 minutes. And 15 minutes went by, and a half hour went by, and an hour went by, and we're sitting there. I mean, we're literally playing solitaire and, you know, just waiting for them to get back with their, you know, did they have a counter proposal? Did they have some other issues and this and that? And we're just sitting there, and Morris he had the toothpick in his mouth. He used to have a toothpick in his mouth.
after he put his pipe.
Yeah, and a pipe, you know, and he was sitting there, and he was getting just antsy. Just, where in the hell are they? They said, be back 15 minutes, and it's an hour and a half, 2 hours later, and this and that. And they didn't come back, and they didn't come back. And finally, Morris kind of threw down his papers like this, and he said, Jesus, he said, you know, those people, they either got to fish or get off the pot. I mean, he mixed up two cliches. And he didn't even realize he did it. And I remember looking at Dick Collins and going, what did he... And then we just broke up. I mean, then we just laughed our heads off. And Morris was kind of half embarrassed, half, thought it was funny after he'd said, we have to this day, I still use that quote, he has to fish or get off the pot. Mixing up the shit or get off the pot, or fish or cut bait,
Right.
and he mixed them both up. That was Morris, though. He would do something like that.
He had another one that Dick Collins was my vice president and president from 89 to 92, I think. And I think we were at a board meeting. I don't remember if Terry remembers this, but we were going off there and he says, look, we've got to be careful because if we aren't, we're going to shoot ourselves in the ass with our foot.
Yeah, well,
That's Morris.
Yeah, that's
It is isms, man, stuff.